Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's so good to be in a room full of excitement and energy. Welcome, welcome to the Demonstrating Implementation Excellence stream at SNOMED City Expo 2025. Thank you also to AccuViewer for sponsoring this stream. My name is Licínio Costramano. I'm the Customer Relations for Europe at SNOMED International, and I will be your host this afternoon. So, regarding questions, the questions will be at the end. For the online people, please use the Q&A button. For the people in the room, there will be a microphone here. It's my pleasure to introduce Filip Veldeman from Terranova Healthcare and Mark Helbert from ZAS, who will be presenting Operationalizing Belgium's SNOMED City Vision, establishing a national implementation support network for hospitals. Filip, Mark, over to you.
CT, SNOMED CT policy in Belgium and legal context. What's the government goal as defined by a policy paper of the Belgian Minister of Health? The goal is actually to implement SNOMED CT as a standard for structured clinical documentation across all Belgian hospitals by January 2029. The underlying motivation being that the use of a semantic standard is considered fundamental to guarantee clinical data quality and enable semantic interoperability. SNOMED there is considered also the foundation of what we call the BIR, or the Belgian Integrated Health Record. The BIR has not yet been implemented. It is currently a concept. It aims to be a platform that offers a comprehensive and integrated visualization of all the core data elements in a single patient file, regardless of the authentic source behind it. And it is supposed to be a visualization tailored to the needs of the individual end users using it. What's the focus of SNOMED CT implementation in Belgium? The focus is on primary use, so in the EHR for the individual patient. It is primarily on the EHDS priority data elements, starting with diagnoses and procedures, so the elements present in the problem list. And this as a first step to the total data set present in the international patient summary. And the idea is that high quality primary use recordings will then be optimally valorizable for secondary use. The legal context is that the adoption and integration of SNOMED CT in EHR packages will become part of the homologation criteria on national level as on European level.
So where are we today with the implementation of SNOMED CT in Belgium? There is a lot of work being done already in preparing all kinds of things that are absolutely needed, the building blocks that you use to implement SNOMED CT. And it fits a bit in the top-down approach, as we heard this morning, the cathedral approach, where this preparation has been done on content, for instance, by the NRC. There has been a lot of translations done in French and in Dutch, a lot of mappings, also an infrastructure to make the distribution of those terminologies, like David yesterday explained, with a central terminology server and local snowstorm servers that can keep up to date and how to roll that out. And also work on standardization to exchange information through care sets with FHIR. So all those elements, there's been quite some effort already put into that, and we absolutely need that. And it's good that we all have that. What we do see is that having those building blocks alone is not enough, because yeah, if you ask hospitals where they are with SNOMED CT and implementing SNOMED CT, you see that basically the projects that we are doing are mostly with the ones on the left side of the Gauss curve there, the technology enthusiasts or the terminology enthusiasts and the visionaries. But there is still a chasm or a gap to cross before you come to the more pragmatics or the conservatives that say, oh, it's too early, or it's, well, we have other things to do first. But it means that we do have already a lot of experience with those early adopters. But when we ask the other ones, what's the status in your hospital? And we got answers, and this question was asked through the CMIO network, and we got 52 responses, and two-thirds of those hospitals said, yeah, we still have to start with SNOMED CT. So we've maybe heard from it, but it's still something that we are at the very beginning of the journey. So there's big differences, as we will show later as well, between the ones who are really early adopters and the other ones who haven't even started yet. So that's the current situation. And therefore, and that's on the bazaar approach that we heard this morning, there's also a lot of bottom-up initiatives that use those components. There's value sets being made also from the hospitals. There is tooling being developed, and we see that tooling can help a lot. For instance, to migrate from free text to SNOMED CT to start with. If you launch SNOMED CT for a problem list and you have to start with an empty page or an empty problem list, that's hard. But if you have already a qualitative suggestion of, okay, based on the processing of your free text documents, on a potential problem list that's presented, where you can say, I like this, I don't like that, I don't know yet about this one, but it gives you a kind of kickstart or an initial migration to start with structure. The same thing, tooling to exchange and view and enhance problem lists with a couple of hospitals. I will talk to you about this in the next slide. We are also starting to exchange problem lists. I'll come back to that later. And what we also saw in ZAS particularly is that sometimes doctors think the conclusion of my last patient contacts in my discharge letter, it's the conclusion, it's not yet problem list or medical history. That will be when the patient comes back. But we want to keep the problem list up to date. So that's why tooling was also developed to go through the problem list and say, we found this and this diagnosis that is not yet on the problem list. Do you want to add it? Yes, please. And then you keep in sync, and you can use that also the next time, which is really good for the quality of the problem list. And so what we often say is that tooling is one thing, but you cannot just throw some tooling to somebody and hope that it will work like that. And we were very happy that the last couple of years there was government funding for what was called data capabilities projects and innovation projects. And those are projects that are really bottom-up projects with the innovators in the hospitals that say, okay, let's be an example, let's do things, let's test things. And at the end of the project, let's also write down cookbooks and guidelines and lessons learned and share all that, make connections with EHR systems so that with all this information, we have a good ground, let me put it like that, to scale up based on the experiences of those projects. So that was really nice that we could do that. And it was different hospitals working on different things, but a bit in sync in the timeline of this project scope, which made that it was easy to find one another. And you were working on that, and he's working on that, and she's working. And so we could all work on that together, which gave a really good vibe to take all this cathedral stuff and take all this bottom-up stuff and make it work together. And I will show you just two projects to illustrate that. I'm particularly happy with this slide in the slide set because it was one of the next step slides in Atlanta 2 years ago. And in the meantime, we've realized a big part of this. So what you see here is that with 4 hospitals that have already done a lot of SNOMED CT work in their problem list, we said, how great would it be if we can exchange problem lists and view them from one another and consolidate and even reuse from the others what they have. And that's what you see here on the slide. So we start with some kind of viewer editor where you can open it and in the context integration, so you don't have to log in again, you don't have to choose a patient again. And on the local FHIR API, it gets the local problem list. It's the same as the one that you had already, so far not so exciting. But then, and this is exciting, through the Belgian eHealth network in a safe way, you can also get the problem lists in a structured way from the other hospitals and even from the GPs, so that you can see, those are new diagnoses. I didn't have those yet, but I'm interested. Thank you very much. And that's confirming what I had already, so I'm feeling good that what we had was already good, but you can use the information and exchange it. For those who haven't got anything at all, they can also benefit from the work from the other hospitals that have been structuring their problem lists, and that fits completely in the idea of the only once principle that you heard this morning also from our Minister of Health, which is really important. And it's not only once in your own hospital, but across the other hospitals and the first line. So, of that comes cookbooks and integrations and lessons learned. Okay. A next example is the one that I briefly mentioned before, is where you have your problem list in your hospital on one side, your discharge letter, and that you have an instant way of checking, okay, there is extra information in my discharge letter. The diagnosis are taken out of that as a suggestion. Do you want to add them to the problem list? Yes, I do. And like that, you continuously improve what you have. And those are things that are implementation ready and described in the document, project documentation, and it's ready for scaling up in the years to come. Mark, I think the next one is for you.
Okay. What we also know from our current Belgian implementation experiences is that there is a general lack of knowledge about SNOMED CT. The figure on the left, based also on a survey of all Belgian hospitals, actually tells us that when we ask hospitals about their doctors' knowledge on SNOMED CT, 95% of hospitals indicate that their doctor's knowledge is insufficient, and 2/3 even indicate that their doctors have no knowledge at all about SNOMED CT. Sorry. So the problem is clinicians don't have the knowledge on registration and interoperability standards. As a consequence, very few clinicians are aware of the possible benefits of these standards. The reason for this is that in Belgium, basic medical training and specialist curricula do not at all address these topics up to now. Of note, clinicians and hospitals are also often unfamiliar with the government policy on standards and sometimes are even distrustful of it. If we further go into or inquire about the causes or barriers to building this knowledge among clinicians in hospitals, again, the survey gave us the following answer. The most important reason is time investment by those who should teach and those who should get the teaching, clinicians. In addition, there are practical barriers, such as a lack of knowledge among the teachers themselves, and, importantly, insufficient awareness of the potential benefits of having the knowledge, meaning that clinicians will not at all be motivated to gain the knowledge. And that is probably the most important slide of all slides here. It is the fact that we want actually to implement a terminology standard for the sake of interoperability and meaningful reuse. We need buy-in from clinicians for this. While that meaningful reuse and interoperability is currently not at all yet operationalized. That is, there is now, in fact, almost no advantage for clinicians who are, on the other hand, faced with an increased administrative burden in order to comply with the standard. And this, of course, must be seen in a context where administrative burden on clinicians is already very high without standards, and clinician time per patient is increasingly under pressure. So, on the one hand, there are the lessons learned and the known hurdles, which have to do with organization and change aspects, content and structure, technology and integration issues. On the other hand, there are the objectives of the government authorities. And then there are the CMIOs, Chief Medical Information Officers in hospitals, whose role it is to build bridges between clinicians and their health information technology. And I stress their health information technology. This triangle led ZAS Hospital and the Federal Public Service Health, the Terminology Center in Belgium, to the idea that it would be very useful to establish a Belgian network of CMIOs facilitating SNOMED CT implementations in hospitals and among clinicians nationwide. The idea was supported by government and the network has been established. Characteristics of how this network wants to work are it should be bottom-up, it should be clinically driven, experience-based, it should align all stakeholders, and it should act vendor neutral. The network strives for better care through better data, and the best data is the data provided by the clinicians themselves at the source using a terminology standard, and in the end, that will valorize the data for secondary use. For reasons of time, I will not dive into the governance structure that was set up for the network. I just want to stress that both the government, so the Federal Public Service Health, and clinician representatives take on a co-governance role in the steering committee of the network. In addition to facilitating SNOMED CT implementation nationwide, the network also aims to pursue some other objectives. It wants to be considered a key stakeholder by government in government's health IT choices. It wants to represent the voice of clinicians in shaping the national health data infrastructure, and it wants to take up the role of a dedicated partner in optimizing Belgium's health data ecosystem. A first action point that has been defined by this network is the mapping and monitoring of the degree of SNOMED CT implementation in the Belgian hospitals. That is, measure the current situation and measure progress. EHDS is coming soon. It's there in 2029. That means creating implementation heat maps, and based on these heat maps, identify and discuss barriers with hospitals, clinicians, and with government, come together and suggest solutions for these barriers. As a first step to define solutions, a white paper was published. It builds on the idea that structured data capture at the source is the best way to generate valuable data for both primary and secondary use. Two dimensions that are deeply intertwined and therefore should not be viewed separately. The paper highlights the main obstacles within today's Belgian health data ecosystem from a clinical perspective, and it tries to outline key enablers for tackling these obstacles. For those who are interested, it's available on the website of the Belgian Health Data Agency.
Yeah, a second action point is to provide clinical implementation guides for the hospitals. As we said, some hospitals have already more experience than other ones. And so it's nice that those hospitals can share what went well, what went not so well, what can help, what is available, how to approach these things. And so that's really also one of the things that from the CMIO network, we look to provide that kind of information. So answers on questions like how to work with a problem list, how do you do that? Do we need some business rules for that? How to tackle the initial migration, as we call it, from free text to SNOMED CT? How to do the consolidation between problem lists? Yeah, how do you do that? Yeah, what can you learn from the ones that have already some experience with that? And also, what about the tooling? What tooling does exist and how to use it and how to integrate it? I also, yeah, as you've seen before, some of the connectors have also been made in these projects, in these bottom-up projects. So with the technical cookbooks, so it's easy to take them off the shelf and implement them in the other hospitals as well. But the tooling alone will not do the trick. So that's why the extra guidelines and support is needed. What it is not is a central implementation program or a central on-site, central resources to go implement on site, but it's the whole support structure to make sure that the other CMIOs also know what it's about. And the next or third action point is, as Mark mentioned, there is so few knowledge in clinicians about SNOMED CT. It's not yet in their regular training programs. So what we try to do is also provide information, lessons material, things to train the trainer that is also EHR agnostic, that can work for everybody, and also approach the medical faculties that give the training to the doctors, that it becomes an element when they come back to the hospital during their training, that this is also a topic that is addressed. And it was also mentioned in the presentation from UZ Antwerp this morning, that it helps a lot if at least people get some more info on what SNOMED is about and what's the potential of that. And also to look in the continuous training schemes, which are often certified, that this also becomes one of the criteria for certification, that people are a bit pushed in the right direction to get to know about SNOMED CT. So it's not a training institution, but it's coming up with a lot of help and training material, and it looks for the processor where we can get SNOMED CT in the picture of students and doctors that are continuously training.
The fourth last action point is engaging with government and other health data ecosystem stakeholders. This engagement with these partners is necessary to tackle several problems, such as decreasing current administrative burden for clinicians or avoiding that it rises, identify opportunities to increase data sharing and thus data valorization, point out the roles and the responsibilities of the different partners in the health data ecosystem so we can optimize it, pinpoint the necessity for all stakeholders to adopt the standards, not only hospitals and clinicians, government themselves, and pinpoint the necessity for implementing important principles such as the only once principle and the principle that every organization should make their data fair. Fifth action point is that as a network, we want to become a clinical think tank and a guide on certification requirements for EHR vendors. Because implementing standards is not an end in itself. The added value of the standards must be fully utilized in the functionalities provided within the EHR. Factual inter-hospital data exchange must result in tangible benefits in primary use context. Interoperability must be tackled proactively by vendors rather than them adopting a wait-and-see approach. Availability of integration options with AI agents and orchestrators, I remind you of the talk this morning, should absolutely become obligatory. And interoperability may not become a secondary revenue model for vendors. So, in conclusion, a Belgian CMIO network has been established with as task of being a national SNOMED CT implementation support network. It's a CMIO-driven effort in co-governance with the Belgian government, and its primary focus is on clinical needs to speed up the introduction of SNOMED CT in our Belgian hospitals. This translates into describing requirements for vendors, identifying resources, tooling clinicians need to make this a success, and raise these needs with responsible authorities, and address the hurdles in the Belgian health data ecosystem and approach responsible stakeholders so they can make changes. And with this, I think we want to close and we're ready to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Filip and Mark. Impressive work done and inspiring. And that's perhaps it raised me a question that perhaps I will post, but before, just to highlight, this is the question period. In the room, there is a microphone. Please raise your arm if you would like to make the question. We have one here, Peter. And for the ones back home, online, please feel free to use the chat feature. Please.
Thank you very much for the elaboration. I'm a physician, and I am a big fan of SNOMED CT, and I see a lot of potential benefits. But on the other hand, as you said yourself, as a physician, we experience a lot of administration. A lot of our time goes into administration, and my fear is that with um, if you implement SNOMED and you make the physicians also do the registration, then you will only increase the burden. And so my question is more of an open question, or maybe an opinion, is it really up to the physician to do the registration, or could there be a team of medical coders like we now have for ICD-10 who do the SNOMED registration?
I think the answer is double. First, I do think that there is an extra value if the physicians register at the source, because then things will be registered according to clinical relevance. That will be the main driver in registration. I think, and I also want to remind you to what has been said in the general talk this morning, and we have presented some examples. The world is changing through AI, and what registration really means and what it will mean in the near future is not at all what we understand of registration now, which is doctors typing things in certain boxes. This is not going to be the way people are going to do it in 2029. I think clinicians will have a sort of an end validating role. And I think the other thing is that if we have this interoperability and data have been validated by other clinicians, a lot of these data will not have to be revalidated again because they have been validated by a clinician. So it's the interoperability that will also solve partly that problem. I think indeed it could be an idea to have we have in Belgium now a parallel coding system which has only use for administrative purposes, and there is totally no feedback of that system to the clinical forefront, let's say. I think that is indeed also not a good idea, and it would be much more efficient if we could have some type of crosstalk there. So the answer is double.
I would like to add one more thing, is that there's a lot of tooling to help, and if we pay all of us attention to integrating it in a smooth, nice, user-friendly way, and well integrated in the clinician's workflow, then it's not too bad, and it's not sitting in the way, or then, yeah, it's not such a hurdle as we might think, and technology will only move very rapidly to help us even more. But the whole point will be how to bring this into the practice in an easy, helpful way, and not that it's becoming even more confusing. So that's a work to do with all the technical people in the room.
And I think it's very important that as clinicians that we really tell government, if you want to reach this goal, you will have to, or we as clinicians, we will have to have this tooling. It's not going to come by itself, and we will also need to be funded in some way to have this tooling at our disposition. And EHR vendors will also have to be obliged to build in this tooling in their systems, because again, having SNOMED CT as a standard in your system, if the system is not really doing the things with it for which SNOMED CT is conceived, it's totally no use in building it in.
Let's take the remaining time for one more question. There is one more.
I agree. Yeah, thank you.
And just to keep one more question, please, and so that it's here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm a clinician as well, and CMIO as well. So I fully agree. The emphasis is that the doctor should know why, not really on the what and how. It's the who will register, because you have from the source. The source is the most valuable. You are the source of the information. Nobody else. So the accent should be done on the usability of the tools that we have. And this is something that we really need. And so the fifth mission there of the integration of the implementation of terminology. In fact, and don't kill me if I say it, but why should a doctor know that this code is this pathology? He had no added value on that. He has to register that he has to do, but it must facilitated by the softwares. That's the game. That's the game. That's the goal.
Thank you very much. Would you like to add something to it, or?
I fully agree. The clinician should know, of course, what the benefits are of SNOMED CT, but he shouldn't be confronted with SNOMED CT much more than that.
Thank you very much, Filip. Mark, that slide, there is currently no interoperability, which really benefits clinicians, is really scary. So I hope that we can sort this out along the way. Thank you very much, everyone.